Tons of leaders, they got to be a leader. They moved up the organization through positive reinforcement. The question is, has the music changed? Is the dance that they know still appropriate for the new industry? So is the dance of the auto industry the same dance that's necessary? The way decisions are made, the speed in which your decisions are made, the inputs, the forecasting, is it the same as when you move to mobility? Maybe, maybe not, but you need to be thinking about that. Are you doing the right dance or the right music?
That's the voice of Gregg Garrett. He shares that soon, 4 million jobs are going to be eliminated through autonomous vehicles from the U.S. economy. But on the flip side, $7.8 trillion of value will be created. So how does that impact not just our region, but our country? In short, whether it's this or a litany of other stuff that's happening, there is a train of change coming to Southeast Michigan. Welcome to your Daily Detroit for Monday, November 4th, 2019. I'm Garrett He. Gregg Garrett has made a career helping people and companies deal with disruption and be better leaders. He's the founder of CGS Advisors, a local firm that looks at how emerging connected technologies are disrupting industries and society, and then helps people deal with it. He's an author and the host of You, Me, and Your Top 3, a podcast focused on exploring leadership in the connected world. It's an interesting conversation, so let's just get right into it. Gregg Garrett, welcome to Daily Detroit.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Detroit, Metro Detroit, Michigan. There's a lot of just disruption happening in general, whether you talk about the auto industry, you talk about changes in downtown Detroit, people moving in. And I thought it would be interesting to talk to you because you're somebody who has written a book, has a podcast about leadership, how to deal with disruption, how to deal with the inevitable things that are change. So what are some of the things that you're seeing out there in a general perspective?
Yeah, well, the general side, I mean, we see things in layers, right? We look for patterns, and I spend a lot of time talking to leaders about these patterns. But basically, that there's this thing. I'm going to use a big academic term: technological discontinuity. I
like that word.
If you break it down, though, I mean, just take discontinuous, right? It means changing something that was continuous. The world's been pretty continuous for a while now, right? There's been small bumps in the road, but for the most part, life has kind of functioned. And a bunch of technologies, and for the geeks that are listening in, things like cloud or AI or different types of analytics and whatnot, they're all kind of meshing up along with IoT, sensors and everything that we call these connected world technologies. Just a lot of technologies all happening at the same time, and they're helping make disruption real because they're making what was once continuous discontinuous. And so these technologies add up. They're affecting many, many industries and almost all industries at once. Here in Detroit, we feel that in the auto industry. We feel that auto trying to switch to mobility. But that's what's happening at the largest scale is technology is affecting all industries. And now firms and leaders of firms need to figure out what to do with it. And if what's going to happen is industries are going to be disrupted, meaning whoever the top players were, rank ordered down to the lowest player. In several years from now, that ranking is going to change. Top leaders might fall off, others will drive up. There might be some new entrants, but that's what disruption to an industry looks like, and that's the road we're on.
Listening to your podcast, You, Me, and Your Top 3, is almost a masterclass in talking to folks who have dealt with change in different ways. One of the interviews that stuck out for me was the next chapter of Jacques Panis. He is a great, entertaining kind of conversation that you had. But he's also got a whole new chapter. He's working in, gems. He's like growing diamonds, which is very different than what he did at Shinola. But he doesn't seem worse for wear for it. It seems like in some ways, him and many of the other people that you've talked to have kind of seen change and then said, you know what, instead of fighting it, I'm going to, make the best of it.
Yeah, so Jacques' a great guy. It was a fun interview. Definitely listen in on that because he does talk about growing diamonds in Metro Detroit, growing them, literally building.
Which is crazy. I love that.
And so talk about technology that's helping to disrupt an industry. That's certainly it. But the pattern that I'm seeing after doing 25 or so of these interviews formally on a podcast and really living this, being with leaders, helping leaders think through is the one of the things, or maybe two observations I'd make is. Number one, the reason that those changes don't maybe affect them as much or don't seemingly affect them is they're not afraid. They're brave. And the pattern we're looking for in talking to you, me, and the top three are the people they surround themselves with that help them be brave. Who are their mentors? Who are their advisors? Who are just the people that are part of their, quote, club? And what you see is brave people or leaders hang out with other leaders. And when you do that, they kind of push each other and push them forward.
So how do you identify people who are leaders versus somebody who's just kind of full of it? Because, you look on social media and Instagram and everywhere else, everybody's a change maker, an entrepreneur, an influencer, right? They're all ers. But how do you know that they're actually a leader?
Put it really simply, people follow them. Leaders can motivate folks to follow them, or at least motivate people to go in a direction. Sometimes it's them at the front and everybody else is following someone. Sometimes it's them to the side, helping a group of individuals, an organization move somewhere. But that's what a leader is, at the most part, is they understand where the future is going enough. They can build a little bit of a plan to get there, and they can motivate people to go that path. And that's them leading.
So what's at the root of the fear of change from an organizational perspective? I mean, we all know of looking online and saying, oh, well, this website I go to has been redesigned. I hate it, or whatever, right? That's a basic fear of change. But when we're talking about fear of change where you can see it coming, yet, and there are thousands or hundreds or tens of people whose jobs are on the line, if you don't handle it right, like where does that fear come from?
Yeah. So if I can use another one of these academic words, and the listeners, I'm not some deep academic by any means, but I like this word. It's inertia, right? It's being inert means staying still, going slow, and there's a couple different causes of it. You're asking about the leadership type side. I'll break it down into 3 parts. There's so this is what we call dominant logic inertia. This is making you inert for the most part, or leaders inert. And there's 3 flavors. One, I use a boiled frog analogy. It's you've heard this proverb, right? Where you throw a frog in a boiling pot of water, it'll jump right out. If you put a frog in a tepid pot of water and you heat it up, it'll stay in there until it boils to death. There are leaders like that. They just don't see the world around them changing because they just surround themselves with a bunch of other people that are already kind of in the game they're in, and nobody's looking outside, so they just don't see the water getting hot. That's one type of leader. The second one, we use the analogy of a middle school dance. If you can remember back to middle school when you went to a dance, if you got a kiss or a second date, more than likely the dances that you're doing at the wedding that you might be invited to in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, you're probably doing the same dance moves that you were doing in middle school. Why? Because you got positive reinforcement. And so tons of leaders, they got to be a leader. They moved up the organization through positive reinforcement. The question is, has the music changed? Is the dance that they know still appropriate for the new industry? So is the dance of the auto industry the same dance that's necessary? The way decisions are made, the speed in which your decisions are made, the inputs, the forecasting, is it the same as when you move to mobility? Maybe, maybe not, but you need to be thinking about that. Are you doing the right dance for the right music? The last one is just what we call willful blindness. A lot of leaders, especially public company leaders, they're just motivated not to change. Wall Street wants quarter-to-quarter returns. They just do what they're going to do. So that's, at the end of the day, that's a very academic way to put it, but sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's just oblivious, and sometimes it's just sticking with the patterns that they've always known because they're comfortable. They just don't want to break comfort.
That reminds me of the story of Blockbuster and Netflix, because everyone says, you look back and go, well, why didn't Blockbuster evolve into what Netflix became? Right?
Yeah.
All the stores, all that other stuff, but Netflix was online, all that other, and reaching people digitally. But in my mind, I look at it as when you see people do something stupid, you have to look at their immediate incentives because it's probably not stupid in their world.
Yeah, I mean, market leader, right? They probably wasn't. It probably wasn't stupid. It was they were market leaders. They probably didn't see the train coming. Same with the Kodak and the digital camera. There's lots of different advertisements. I teach a course up at Oakland University, an MBA course, and the class last night was talking about Netflix versus NBC for the most part. Of what about these streaming services and what do I think of who's going to win that game? And these streaming services are no longer streaming services; they're studios. This is your world. This is the media world, right? And they were talking a little bit about kind of some of the interactions. But when Netflix started producing shows, they went from a channel to a content creator. And now the way they compete with the people that were putting shows on their channel, it has to be different. It's almost the responsibility of like an NBC to start blocking a Netflix, because what are you going to do? You're going to put Friends, one of your most popular pieces, on your competitor? They used to be a partner. Now they're a competitor. This is what's happening in all industries, is disruptions occurring, and different firms and different leaders are making different decisions. And
that disruption has effects across the economy. And I wonder, I think about folks like Andrew Yang and their whole UBI thing, universal basic income. And I don't know if his answer of giving everybody $1,000 a month is the right one, but I feel like it's that starting to make public that conversation that change is happening. And I think that's what's more important about that idea than the idea itself.
No, I think you're right. I haven't studied his solution. I'm certainly nowhere near endorsing anybody like that. But the point you're making, I think, is a really important one. Is that is a conversation that has to happen. It's for many people. It doesn't seem like a very natural conversation because especially in this capital type of country we've lived in. We've always said, hey, you work hard, you're going to earn your piece. But the reality is automation, no matter if that's mechanical automation like robots or process automation like RPA, robotic process automation that can basically change processes digitally, it's changing the whole way we work. I saw a stat the other day in preparing for a keynote that autonomous vehicles are predicted to remove 4 million jobs from the U.S. economy. 4 million jobs for basically having things drive around. On the flip side, the study showed that it was around $7.8 trillion of value will be created by creating new jobs. In the end game, it looks great. In the short term, it looks terrible. But the transition plan is going to be painful for some and glorious for others. Managing the transformation is where the artistry is. Managing the transformation between that's going to be unbelievable.
So that makes me think, do people need to think as leaders of their own households? Do people need to embrace that kind of change? If you think about if you're working for a company that is in that transportation world and you see that this value is changing, is it that idea or is it on you to learn new skills, to change what you do? Like, can those leadership lessons kind of be applied on a micro level to one's own life?
I think they have to, because especially when you brought up the universal wage, right? Depending on or counting on society to solve the problem for you, maybe that's some people's answers. But I think it's all layers. It's individual and small household decision-making leadership. I think it's corporate and organizational leadership. And then I think that it's societal and industry kind of leadership. All three levels are going to need to interplay with one another. But yeah, absolutely, people should be thinking about this.
For me personally, I see a lot of change coming to Metro Detroit. The news about like Rivian, its growth over the years, Amazon buying a bunch of, electric cars, Tesla's doing their thing. You could point out all kinds of brands and what they're doing in different ways. Ford and their electric stuff. I feel like that's just the whole thing as a bigger picture says there's like a train of change coming. If you look at all those pieces and instead of saying, oh, well, is it Rivian versus Tesla or is it Ford or is it GM? I look at the whole thing and go, wow, there's a train coming.
It is, and it's one thing that might be on the train is capabilities, right? So all those firms are competing for sets of capabilities, and those that get it. So you talked about a bunch of electric vehicle type of platform companies. They're all competing for the sum of the same skills, right? It's electrical engineers, people that understand power, that type of powertrain, et cetera. And it's a pretty finite group of individuals. You take that up to the information technology level where we talk about data science or things like I said RPA earlier or artificial intelligence. The underpinning capabilities of those cut across all industries. So it's not just competing. It's not GM competing against Ford anymore. It's GM competing with Ford against Tesla, and if you're talking data science, against Beaumont, against all the regional players and folks down in Alabama. These skills are so sought after that there's just not enough to go around. And until the market catches up, there will be both opportunity and pain. Some people are going to make decisions. Some people are going to be leaders because they see great opportunity and they're going to run towards it. Others are going to maybe be motivated to do something because of extreme fear. It's the people in the middle. It's the people in the middle that aren't quite motivated to do something and aren't quite scared enough that are probably going to fail in the end. Those are the ones that you should probably be worried about.
So your concept of the top three is very similar to one mentor of mine who said that you are the sum of the top 5 people you spend your time with, right? Whether it's personal or professional, the top 5 people you spend your time with, that's the sum. That's what creates how you approach the world, how brave you are, as you've said. How do you identify, for you, it's, the top 3, which I think is a great similar thought. How do you identify those 3? Do you think it's professional? Are you saying the 3 professionally or saying professionally and personally? And how should someone look at it and say, if they do a self-evaluation and go, I need to pick my 3. Give them some tips. So
as far as the podcast goes, I give no coaching if it's professional or not. A lot of the conversation ends up being professional, so sometimes I think it slews that way. But I've had one of the most recent guests came on and totally pulled an audible. He sent me 5 ahead, and got on and said, I want to talk about my mom first, and gave a whole story about how his mother really set him on the career path, and it was incredible. So some people go ultra personal, some people go friendships, many people go professional. And I think, just like you said of your mentor, it really depends on where the person is in their life. Are they spending a lot of time at work? Are they retired already? Are they between jobs? Who they're spending time with will be a part of it. The first thing I'd say is be able to name some. If you think, who are your top 3 people, and your immediate reaction is, well, I don't really have any. Well, then really maybe evaluate, because you probably do. Dig a little deeper. Who are you spending time with? Because just as you said, they're probably your mentors. You just don't really realize it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'd say write them down. Every guest, I'm about 25 episodes in, 80% of the guests have told me that they've written me after the fact and said, this exercise in preparing for coming on the podcast has started a whole kind of conversation for me. And here's what I see. I'm calling leaders. Most of them are in their prime. Most of them are leading right now. A few of them are past leaders or kind of looking at leadership in the
Emeritus,
past.
if you will.
Exactly. I love it. Because of that, I think most people take time after they're done with something to reflect back. And I'm asking people, just hit the pause button for 10 seconds and look around you. And how are you? And because of that, the feedback I'm getting is, this is really a helpful exercise. This is actually therapeutic. I've had conversations with people in different ways than I've ever had after coming on your show, which I never knew was going to happen, but it's a part of the incredible experience. So my advice to folks are, really write them down immediately, then reflect on them for a little while. If you're struggling on writing them down at all, really look around. Look at your calendar. Who are you spending time with over the course of 6 months? And the people you're spending time with, those are probably your top 3.
One of the things that strikes me in, maybe it's your delivery, maybe it's in your even-keeledness when I read the book or listen to the show, is that you're somebody who, I guess it strikes to me that there's balance. It strikes to me that you value some sort of making yourself happy in some way. And I read something interesting recently that was about people have kind of 4 burners, and you can't have all 4 burners going at once. Do you kind of subscribe to that? Do you manage your burners? How do you approach it?
Oh, that's good. Well, thanks for putting it on me.
I mean, you are the guest.
I love it. With the burner concept, I imagine when you say that, like circular burners, like the old style,
yeah, like on a stove,
glow, orange glow.
Yeah.
I would have a Venn diagram of burners. The way I manage it is I probably light them all up, and I probably light them up too much. But the reason that I can actually keep more than one burner on at a time is I try to get them to overlap. And so I teach, at a university, I keynote, I do a podcast, I run a company, I do these different things. But a lot of the subject matter, a lot of the people, the network, they all interrelate. So guest lecturers in my class might be a client of my company. And I might also, one of their friends that they've recommended me to is maybe where I'm keynoting, and then I bring some people on a podcast. I'm able to manage a lot of different burners, if you will, by forcing overlap inside of that and seeing it as a system instead of 4 individual burners. And that's how I see the world, as a big system.
I kind of like that hack a little bit. It makes it personal and something that I think it makes a lot of sense. Because for me, obviously, like doing a podcast for a living, you end up overlapping everything. I'm spending time with my dog while building sound panels in my backyard. That's just one little example, but there's just so many things. Or getting to talk to folks like you, which is really great. For you, who's your top 3?
Oh, look at you turning that around. So I've had a couple of on the show. My co-author, Warren Ritchie, is definitely, Dr. Warren Ritchie is absolutely one of them. He's been somebody in my life for a long, long while, and he's taught me a lot, and he's been along the professional journey, and he's been on, so you guys can tune into that episode if you'd like to. Another category and I won't name just one right now, but there's a handful of individuals that have been more formal mentors in my life, career mentors, people that have been presidents of companies or CEOs, and I've got a small handful. I'm still trying to get them on some of them on the show. They fit a class of top 3. And the other one is family, and I'll break it into kind of 3 people very, very quickly. One's my wife. She's my day-to-day partner. Talk about someone who I'm with a lot. It's Amy. A second one is emeritus, I guess, a little bit, is my grandfather. He was my first mentor, really. He was my father figure. And he gave me all kinds of sayings, and he was very successful in business and set me out. And then last but not least, I'll end with the one that my guest had a few weeks ago, which is my mom. I was raised by a single mom. I was an only child raised by a single mom, and she played a lot of roles. And she showed me that Bunsen burner, that burner analogy. She showed me how to juggle that stuff. So that would be mine.
I can share personally, I was raised by a single father, and it has changed how I look at the world differently than my friends who were raised by two parents. I just look at it differently. Like there's so many things that he had to juggle and do that were so much different than when you've got two parents around, and you really learn like work ethic, how to like balance different things. For me, I started working full time when I was 16 years old.
You grew up fast, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
You have to grow up fast.
Yeah. I feel you, man. And it's I think there's good and bad in it, and I don't think that necessarily folks that were raised by single parents are any better than those that had it's just different, and drawing the goodness and understanding the toughness out of all of them are just something that people should be doing out there.
I agree. Gregg Garrett, author of Competing in the Connected World, The Future of Your Disrupted Industry, is already here. Also podcast host. Where can people listen to your show?
They can get it on all the directories. It's called You, Me, and Your Top 3. If you're looking for a website, the easiest way is to go to the corporate website, which is www.cgsadvisors.com/podcast.
All right, that'll do it for today's show. Daily Detroit is powered in part by our members. Thanks to Rick, Matt, Lon, Christopher, Tony, Jennifer, and everyone else. Very much thank you. You can join them for just a few bucks a month at patreon.com/dailydetroit. And thank you for helping push Detroit's conversation forward. Here are a couple quick housekeeping things. On Wednesday, we'll be podcasting live at TEDx Detroit at the Masonic Temple. If you're there, the whole team will be there. Come say hello. Friday, we're focusing on Detroit Future Cities Reinvestment Index, and we'll be talking to them about their large report that tracks perceptions of Detroit's revitalization and economic growth. If you have any questions that you want to send me before we get into that interview, go ahead and do that at jer@dailydetroit.com. And finally, thanks for listening. I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.